Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and we've got a guest coming on here today that I've been so excited for our conversation because so much of her work is about instilling positive thinking and belief in people. And for us as entrepreneurs, holy cow, that is so important. So let me tell you about today's guest. Her name is Melissa Hoffman. Melissa is a seasoned sales leader and experienced performance coach with over 10 years of working with individuals and teams to help them achieve their goals and maximize their potential by making necessary changes to accelerate mental agility, promote healthy work-life integration, and sustainable growth. She accomplishes this in group and one-on-one sessions by using a variety of techniques. We're going to get into these here today, including implementing psychological skills and tactical exercises, positive psychology, and mindfulness practices to drive greater cohesion and performance. Melissa is a certified life and executive coach. She's certified in so many amazing things that we all need for our own benefit in our business and personal growth journeys, including the psychology of leadership, the power of team culture, managing as a coach, building high performance teams, and influence from a variety of higher learning institutions. She also holds a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from the University of Albany up in New York, which, fun fact, is actually where I was born. So I'm so excited about this. Melissa is actually local to me as well. So many cool entrepreneurs doing amazing work. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Melissa Hoffman. All right, Melissa, I am so excited that you're here with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to talk to you and be here with you.
Heck yes. So you and I have quite a few parallels in our own lives and business journeys, but I'm so excited to hear all about it from you here today. So take us beyond the bio. Who the heck is Melissa? How did you start doing all these amazing things that you're into today?
Who the heck is Melissa? Melissa is someone who has been in the beverage alcohol industry for a very long time, fine wine, distribution, imports, and I made my way into the tech space before getting back to my roots, which is that degree in psychology you mentioned that I got in your hometown, apparently. And I started to have this vision for what the future could look like at the organization I was at the time, and got certified as a coach. I'd always had this really strong acumen and adaptability and interest in the human mind, in the interactions between the two, in what we are capable of, both in the positive and in the negative. And after that, I went down this rabbit hole of self-study. I've got a whole wall unit full of books behind me that you can see, Brian, but our listeners certainly can't. And then some of those courses that you mentioned. And the further I went, the more I was able to offer the organization that I was a part of as a salesperson and a sales leader, and really optimizing the performance of those that reported into me. It was, they put a lot of trust in me, and it was something of a laboratory that I had to experiment with. And it was a lot of fun. And I decided that I wanted to do something also for myself concurrently while I was in that role.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the professional element of how I got there. But every superhero or villain has their origin story, and that's not quite it. But we'll get more into how the practices came to be versus what the trajectory looked like.
Yeah, I love that overview, Melissa, especially the way that you articulate it. You have such a gift for articulating the way that you think and the impacts that you have on others. And I know, obviously, in doing my research for today's session, that so much of it, the reason why you're so skilled at this is because a lot of your business and the work that you do today was really to scratch your own itch, which I love for listeners to hear real life stories like yours, because so many of our businesses started out that way. And I know that you've had your own experiences in healing yourself from chronic health issues. Talk to us about what that looked like and how that formulated the way that you approach the work that you do.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it starts at a really dark time as most great rises, I guess, come from. And I was living in New York City, which is an energetically tough place to live. And especially then I didn't know what I know now, is which I carry a reasonably high sensitivity to that level of energy, and particularly to the dense energy that the city was carrying. I had a whole slew of things going on professionally that I was dissatisfied with. I was also not satisfied in the romantic relationship that I was in. And in addition to that, had some pretty severe dysfunction going on with my nuclear family unit. And it took quite some time to realize, but the enduring of it all ignited a health crisis that had left me more fatigued than I've ever been in my life, in a significant amount of pain, and not really knowing what to do next. And so what came next was basically taking a hand grenade to my life, blowing it up, relocating to the Tampa Bay Beach area as one of the first steps, and moving into a different role, still in the same industry. And it would take even more time before I began addressing my health. But once I did, that's where I systematically began to put the pieces back together, and did this like crash course degree in how do you recover from proper burnout.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Melissa. I knew that our conversation would go in all sorts of directions here today, but I can't help but ask this question here early on in our conversation, because considering your own personal journey and considering your professional expertise and considering all these things, I know that there's going to be so many times today where we weave from body to mind to performance and all of these things that are, of course, incredibly interwoven. And such a classic question is the chicken or the egg. Well, what do we focus on first? Is it body health? Is it mental health? How does it all fit together? Please help me unpack this so we can start going deeper.
Yeah, let's unpack this. So for me, I guess high level, it's the belief that true success comes from the balance of physical, mental, emotional, and professional well-being. And so with all of those buckets, there's room to flex in and out, to focus on one, to pour into the next, to do little by little in each of those buckets in order to improve the overall picture. For me, it was physical, mental, and emotional health was the priority. And that then began to spill into the professional well-being as time went on. I began first with physical. That was the most critical pain point, pun intended, I think. That was the most critical pain point that I was having at the time, is I am in pain all of the time and I need to figure out why. And through that, ended up on a dietary protocol, a quite restrictive one called the autoimmune protocol, which is the removal of all known inflammatory foods. And if I didn't mention a time or two already, I was in the fine wine industry. I was an Italian wine specialist, food culture. I had moved back to New York prior to the moment that I took the grenade to my life, from a few months overseas in Italy. And so I really had to pick apart everything that I was passionate about, that was part of my work. And the next stage of that was not the victory that the pain started to go away, but it was all of a sudden this mental clarity that I had. And I didn't know then what I know now, is that the brain fog and anxiety and the, weaving in and out of experiencing depressive symptoms were just as much tied to what was wrong as the pain I was experiencing.
Yeah, that's a really interesting overview, especially because when we talk about performance, especially within the world of entrepreneurship, I love having these real conversations, Melissa, which is why I so appreciate having amazing guests like you on, because I feel like a lot of the emphasis on performance is, the hustle culture that the Gary V's of the world are really out there preaching. And they talk about having high converting marketing funnels. And it's those components of performance, quote unquote, that we really focus on. And we ignore the fundamental, the foundational elements that enable us to perform, which is obviously our mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, all of that well-being. And I think that you're really uniquely equipped because you're right, that psychology background, there's so much that you understand at levels that we may not be able to articulate about the way that we think. Now, obviously, it sounds to a lot of listeners when they hear podcast interviews, oh, Melissa, you were down in the dumps, you went through your journey and you came out the other side. Obviously, there was so much psychological stuff that was behind the scenes. Just like all of us, when we grow our businesses, there's self-doubt, there's insecurities, there's comparisons that we shouldn't be making. All this stuff goes on. Where did you find your mind going in those low moments? And then what was the catalyst to really get to that better place mindset-wise?
What a question. I have some materials that I have created as a part of my coaching and a training series that I've created as a part of my coaching that carry the name The Invisible Opponent. And the invisible opponent is that voice in our head that is dissenting. It is anti-growth minded. It wants to keep us safe, but it doesn't know what safe is. And that is the primary obstacle to everything that's on the other side of that brick wall. This is not an original thought. New level, new devil. So this opponent is going to exist in iteration after iteration for the length of time that you are in pursuit of X, in pursuit of Y. The next phase of any of that journey, that voice is going to come out and it is going to remind you that you are in brutally scary territory and we can't do this because we have to go back and lay under the blankie and be safe. But again, it doesn't know what safety is. And so it's about creating a relationship with that voice so that it becomes your partner or your teammate. And so that you're actually working together. And that really begins with developing self-awareness, being the watcher. And I credit a lot of the beginning of my path to conquering some of these challenges, and they pop up, they flare up every now and then also, but with beginning a meditation practice that was doctor prescribed, naturopathically doctor prescribed. And I had tried meditating and I can't, and my brain is too busy and I'm broken and meditation is broken and this is trash. And the advice I got was trying is doing, and that's all I had. And so I began to research and find different methodologies to apply to this practice. And I really credit the pursuit of a calmer mind as being the driving force to almost everything that I've been able to achieve since then.
Wow, Melissa. Well, thank you for saying it was a great question, but you gave an even greater answer because it's not often that I get chills here on the air, but you very much gave it to me when you said, I've never heard that expression before, new level, new devil. And I think that this is such an important concept for us to go deeper into for our listeners, because whether you're an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur, what Melissa just revealed to you, a lot of newer entrepreneurs, I mean, I'm 16 years into this journey, but I always laugh when I hear newer entrepreneurs say, oh, well, when I get over imposter syndrome, then I'm going to be able to do this. And in my head, I'm like, you're not getting over it. Like, I'm just picturing it as a battle, Melissa, where we just become better fighters as we mature and as we grow. And that is probably my favorite name ever for a program, The Invisible Opponent. Talk to us about that, because the listeners who think they're going to one day overcome or get rid of it, now they know it's just going to be new level, new devil. How do we get better so that we're better equipped to deal with those new devils?
Yeah, that's exactly it. For me, it was becoming very intimate with what that voice had to say. And the kind of the reel that I play back for myself is, all right, I have put in all of this work into the awareness of what this voice is capable of. and she's a beast. Be it the way that I was raised, be it the belief system that wasn't inherently mine, that I was nurtured into, the societal pressures and the dissenting culture in many ways. I mean, we've come a long way, I think, in the last 10 or 15 years into some of these practices, but it's about slowing down, and it's about getting intimate with that voice, listening to it, being able to tolerate it and what it says. The level of discomfort that we are generally willing to endure is quite low, broadly speaking. And personal and professional growth is, it's like that phrase, simple or easy. Something can be simple and not easy. And to develop yourself in these ways, the methodology is pretty simple, but the reality is that it is not easy. We are confronted with the things that are the most emotionally difficult and challenging to come face to face with and come to terms with, and processing that sometimes requires the help of a coach. Sometimes it requires the help of a therapist. Sometimes a group of people as a team helping you pick these things apart. And self-improvement is not, it's not inherently complicated, but the emotional response to it is what makes it complicated. And so that's where I started to bring in a voracious hunger for learning more about how our nervous systems work, and utilizing practices to be able to endure the difficulty of confronting these very challenging obstacles, to making one with what that voice has to say. For many people, depending on what their life circumstances have given them, have some version of incredibly challenging, capital T trauma, to negative, repetitive relationship patterns that inhibit their growth, right? So whichever direction your voice is wanting to take you back to into your past, in effort to limit your future with reasonably good intentions, I guess, like don't walk towards that tiger. It requires a sense of deep commitment to understanding what is possible on the other side. And when you're first getting started, that can be really, really challenging to understand. And sometimes people have to really have their back up against the wall before they're willing to confront these things, unless they have a bit of a glimmer to look through, a light at the end of the tunnel. Like, I believe that this is possible. Someone has convinced me that if I do the work, I'll get there. And balancing where you are in that place can be difficult sometimes.
Yeah, Melissa, I'm going to say this. It's not every day that I hear a New Yorker say things, such recurring themes such as slow down. We need a calm mind. Those are such essential things. It reminds me of that Taoist proverb that I've always loved, which says, it is only through clear water that we can see. I think about it all the time when I'm walking downtown here in Tampa along the Riverwalk. When it's choppy water, you can't see anything through the water. When it's calm, you can see right through to the bottom. And I also think about it within the context of my favorite hobby is tennis. And when I'm on the tennis court, it's frantic. I'm trying to get to the ball. I'm trying to hit the right shot. I'm trying to make the right decisions. Whereas people always say about the most skilled players in the world, I'm going to pick on Roger Federer for a second. When you watch him play tennis, it looks like he has all the time in the world. Time slows down. He's way calmer. He's making those better decisions. And that's why I love in your work, you talk about, you don't say we just need to slow it down. You actually talk about psychological skills and tactical exercises, that it's a skill. That's encouraging for, I think, myself and all the listeners, because we are self-improvement junkies as entrepreneurs. How do we start developing these skills? Because a lot of people want to trick themselves into believing you either have it or you don't. Why is this a skill, Melissa?
Because it's not inborn and it's not static. We are born into this life where, depending on your age at this moment in time, the generation that you were born into, the availability of more Eastern practices was pretty siloed and pretty limited. And as the age of information grew and spread, and these what are perceived to be more softer tactics or techniques get the same bad rap as when people say soft skills. No, this is alpha. I almost swore. I didn't know if I could swear on your podcast. This is some serious alpha stuff. And through my choice of how I take people through, how I work myself through new challenges and how I take people through challenges, is a deep understanding of your nervous system and how your body responds to perceived threats. Gratitude is another really big part of the practice because it is a natural rewiring of our own circumstances. And it, in and of itself, whether it's self-reflected gratitude, whether it's external gratitude, where you're involved with another person or the collective in a group in expressing gratitude, there is a neurochemical reaction to that. It stimulates the production of dopamine and serotonin, and those are the neurochemicals of pursuit and satisfaction. So you've got this natural developing of these two things that keep us aligned toward a mission. Meditation, the stillness to absorb all of what is around you and not run from it, is a massive skill. And then we get into emotional regulation and thought and behavioral change, these ingrained patterns that almost present. I'll use this as an example. You're at the top of a snowy mountain. You're the first person down on the sled. You've got the ability to bob and probably maybe not bob and weave, but you get what I'm saying, to navigate whatever path it is that you want to take. All right, so now you're the next person and the next person and the next person. Think about it as the next thought and the next thought and the next thought. We have somewhere between 75 and 90,000 thoughts a day, and the majority of those are negative and repetitive. And all of a sudden, you've got this almost luge-like indentation in the snow, and you have no other choice but to follow that exact path and pattern without conscious decision-making and a good amount of effort. So, speaking very specifically to entrepreneurs that are listening to this, there's nothing that comes from this path that is not effortful. And those are the places that yield the most benefit for keeping your mindset and mind in general tight, but it requires constant effort, because every time you butt up against something, there's another emotion that's popping up, and understanding how to work with it. There's another behavior pattern that comes from a line of thinking. We can think of the cognitive distortions, for which perfectionism is one of them, right? We go back to that phrase, great is the enemy of good. Yeah, man. Totally. But I cannot quote the old school cowboy directly who said this. Maybe we can find that out. But there's a phrase that he uses, and it's about horse training. Take the time it takes to take less time. And so you mentioned that you've never heard a New Yorker talk like this to be able to slow down. But if you're moving too fast in a 12-cylinder engine that you don't really know how to navigate, you're probably going to crash.
Yeah, gosh. Again, you're giving me all the chills today. All of my arms. I mean, it's been cold here in Florida lately, Melissa, but
I'm wearing a turtleneck. Yeah, it has.
You're making me even colder here. We're giving me all the chills here today. But so much of it, I always tell people I think I have the coolest job because I just get to have conversations like these all day long. But I'm starting to think you also might have the coolest job, because especially when you apply it to entrepreneurs, when you apply it to, you work with really high performing leaders and people who want to be even more high performing. And you bring up things like emotional regulation. When we start tying that into the world of entrepreneurship, the world of trying to grow a business, grow a team, manage people, there's so many triggers that come along the way. Melissa, I think back a decade ago to my early 20s, and gosh, as entrepreneurs, we have so many high highs, but boy, do we have so many low lows. We get rejected every single day of our lives. When we have wins, those are like huge for us. If we get a new client or something along those lines, there's so many highs and lows Talk to us about emotional regulation, because I feel like so much of my own personal journey is I chalk this up. I always tell people, I'm like, I'm an old head now at 35, and I chalk it up to age, but of course it's not age. Of course, a lot of it is reps, experiences, conquering those inner demons so that we get stronger and more ready for the next demons. What's emotional regulation mean? And especially in the case of entrepreneurs, maybe those newer entrepreneurs that are listening to us right now who are facing all of these constant triggers, how do they navigate those very choppy waters?
Yeah, that is a loaded barrel of a question, because you're exactly right. The highs are super high, the lows are super low. And, for me, I cut my teeth on that grit and rejection resilience as a job skill. And there are so many entrepreneurs that have an idea, have a passion for, have a calling to, that may not have experience in the field of sales or the field of marketing or anything else that it does take to drive a business forward. And so I do credit that a lot. I also grew up an athlete, which is very helpful to, one, being coachable, which includes self-coaching, two, being resilient, because no matter what, no matter who, even the top athletes, right? Even Brady's losing a game here and there. And being able to recognize the emotions, manage the voice. It's all about this voice, right? Manage the voice that comes along with those emotions. And then the more observant that you get, you become more in tune to when you're experiencing them, how they manifest in your body and in your mind, which gives you a more effective way to navigate flipping it to the opposite. I'll give this as an example. I am a meditation facilitator, and for each of these modules for the training series, or just up on my YouTube channel, which is all guided meditations, there are topics unrelated, but I have a meditation for this emotional regulation module where I guide the listener, the practitioner, through different emotions. So we bounce back from light emotions into dense emotions. And I am navigating through recalling a time when you were X: joyful, discouraged, happy, angry. We go back and forth, and it's imagining that emotion. It's feeling where it pops up in your body. What is your physiological reaction to that emotion? Feel it, be with it, try not to identify with it, but it really gets someone deep into that space. And then we move into a more, quote, positive or light emotion after that. And what that does, and one of the goals is to be able to feel where you find anger in your body. Before you intellectualize an emotion, your body is experiencing an emotion, going back to that nervous system penchant that I have. And the idea here more deeply is the subtle programming, and maybe not so subtle if I think about the script that I wrote, is you can choose which emotion you want to feel in the midst of a different emotion by making a choice. And that's one of the critical elements to be able to manage those emotions. And you mentioned people reporting to you and having a team and all of these things. I mean, other human beings are, first of all, they're unavoidable. But secondly, they are the biggest mirror to look into that you could possibly find. And the ability to see what comes up as a result of those reflections is, I think, one of the most critical skills in life, let alone, but also in business.
Yeah, gosh, I love those insights, Melissa. For me, they hit really close to home. One of my closest friends in the world is Ian Westerman, who's been on the show a few times before. He's a 7-figure entrepreneur. He's a YouTube star when it comes to the tennis industry. And I remember a conversation Ian and I had once where he was just like, dude, do you ever get like anxious or nervous or any of those things? And I was like, I don't think so. I don't think those are emotions that I keep in my wallet. And he said to me, he's like, well, you must. He goes, I think you just misinterpret them. You call them excited. And so he's like, the symptoms are all the same. And I think that taking those moments to reflect on how we are feeling in those, I always say taking inventory. It's a phrase I say like 50 times a week here on this show, but taking inventory of our life, of our thoughts, of our businesses, all of these things are incredibly important. So yeah, Melissa, we're going to plug your guided meditations on YouTube. Listeners, that link is going to be down in the show notes. So definitely check that out. We're going to circle back to that. But Melissa, I knew we wouldn't have enough time today. I'm not going to let you go just yet. I want to squeeze a few more things out of you because you had one of my favorite ever answers when we ask all of our guests, what's your zone of genius? And you wrote, believing in and supporting people so deeply that they cannot help but believe in themselves, helping them find and reminding them of their power. Melissa, that's something we all need in our lives. What does that look like for you as someone who does this on a daily basis with your clients? What does that actually look like to put into practice for and with, I'm going to put both of those caveats on there, with your clients?
It is incredibly proprietary to the individual. And it starts out with a deep dive into what their desires are. So we don't start with what's holding you back. We'll sort that out. But what is it that you want out of this one, again, not an original thought, wild and precious life that we have? And once I know what motivates a person, whether it's they're working in this role, but what motivates them is their family, we're gonna customize how we work together to be able to more effectively get you more of what you want, less of what you don't want where possible. And sometimes I have picked this up at many different stages in my life and my career. Most people just need someone to believe in them. And I have seen so many different types of people achieve things that they never thought were possible. Our emotional and mental selves are far more flexible than people give them credit for until they try. And we start small. We build self-esteem by I give layup esteemable acts, the lowest hanging fruit, so we can build that muscle until it's greater and greater and greater. And the response to their own performance is what lights me on fire. And I think there are 5 love languages. Like one of my love languages is undocumented, and it is reminding people of the power that they have. We are superhuman beyond measure, and sometimes we just need to be reminded of that. And that is something that I absolutely love to do.
Yeah, that's a really powerful message, not only from Melissa, but it's a powerful message for all of us on the receiving end of her message here today. And Melissa, I love how you took the time to point out, the 5 love languages. It's a great thing to pull in here because it is different for all of us. For me, if you just tell me that you believe in me and you say a couple nice things about me, I will go take on the world. And so we all have those things. And that's why, listeners, I'm throwing it out there. If you've never heard of a performance coach or you've never worked with one, this is why you want someone like Melissa in your corner, because this is what she does for a living. She knows how to build us up, not only superfluous superfluously. I don't know how I would make that as an adverb.
Superfluously? Yeah. Yeah.
But she doesn't do it just in that manner. She does it so that we gain those tools, those skills, so much of what we talked about here today, so that we learn to fight those devils along our own journeys as well within ourselves. And so I think that's really important, Melissa. Along those lines, gosh, there's so much that we covered here today. I knew we would run out of time, and I'm so excited for future collaborations that listeners don't know about just yet later in 2024. But Melissa, with all of that in mind, what's the one takeaway? What's that one actionable thing that you hope every single listener, whether they're a entrepreneur going through their own inner demons or they're an entrepreneur who's fighting new ones at every single stage of their personal and business development, what's that one thing you hope they walk away with?
I also can't quote wherever this came from, whomever said it. Everything you want is on the other side of whatever you're afraid of.
Yeah, I love that. I also love that you're just like me. We hear all these great nuggets of knowledge. We may not be able to reference them, but they always bubble to the surface when we need them. So I absolutely love that insight, that takeaway for every single one of of these listeners. Go back, listen to Melissa's answers, because this is, we always say success leaves clues. These are the clues for how Melissa serves her clients. This is the clues for how Melissa has navigated her own entrepreneurial journey, both in business and in life. When I say entrepreneurial journey, it's inclusive of all the stuff and the luggage that comes along the way. So Melissa, I love these insights. For listeners who want to go deeper into your work, drop those links on us. Where the heck can they find out more about the way you work, the work that you do, and how you take on new clients?
Yeah, my company is named Dauntless Performance Coaching. So you can find that on the web at dauntlesspc.com. You can find me on Instagram at Dauntless Performance Coaching, and the YouTube channel is also Dauntless Performance Coaching.
And listeners, you already know we're making it as easy as possible for you to hit all those links. Scroll on down to the show notes, wherever it is that you're tuning in. You'll find a link to Melissa's business website at dauntlesspc.com, as well as her social handles. We're also linking to Melissa's personal LinkedIn if you want to reach out to her and connect there. So Melissa, on behalf of myself and all the listeners, thank you so much for sharing all these perspectives, experiences, and knowledge with us here today.
Thank you, Brian. It was really lovely chatting with you today.